when people I know are on the panel, because then I'm like, oh shit, they're gonna actually judge me.
That's how y'all let me speak first. You're like, yeah, like you said.
The judge has become the judge.
Whoever passed
Brandon,
it.
are you done? Are you
Hold
good?
on,
Are
man.
you-
Okay, it's fine. I'll just fill it in later.
No, are you?
Turbines easy.
Okay, sure. Just go.
Only 100 words.
I'm going late.
60 words per minute, faster than that. You did it 20.
Alright, anyone not ready? Great. Pleasure and pain are the starting point of moral reasoning that makes baselines desires and anything that plain intrinsic objects actions don't succeed.
Louder.
A body shaped having intrinsic values that pleasure is intrinsically
Louder.
valuable and pain is intrinsically disvaluable to something. Underlying good about pleasure might ask what further reason is that pleasure not good for anything further. We never ask one that is being pleased because we assume pleasure worthy of itself. If something is painful, we have a sufficient explanation of why bad pleasure beat the end line of attitude value. For intrinsic value, thus the standard is maximizing expected well-being preferred as you want active specificity. Government policies constrained by limitation of resources. Any government decision must account for trade-offs which unequal can do back for. When the decision involves more other issues that we consider, advocacy may not square with the most advantageous policy to society, more expensive for one, mean less for another because of the scarcity of resources. Ethics should rationally best balance statements for resolution of interpersonal conflict, distributed craftsmanship, maximize welfare policy be judged solely in terms of resulting utility. Skip the analytics and extinction outweighs establishment moral evil. Word 17. Extinction would prevent the existence of any people is a good thing for people to exist. Extinction would deprive more people of dreams. Billions of people likely die painful deaths would be no future generation. The value of all those generations greatly sees the value of the current generation. I mean the loss of the only known form of intelligent life, all civilization, and the life of progress would be lost. Using people who endure physical pain if they're killed without the consent, their interests have not been taken into account. Existing people could endure non-physical harm that could be irritative to your psychological effects. So this is by no means universal. It's fair to say a good proportion of people feel a strong pull toward reproduction, but source of psychological harm and personal reason. The projector principle that permitted human extinction is given the next part. The first advantage is act. Federal immigration surveillance instills fears and deters immigrants from partaking in society regardless of legal status. The plan solves Yankee 12. Anti-immigrant state laws are restricted to local ordinances. What happens to larger committees documenting non-economic ramifications of anti-immigrant legislation, excluding policies that ramped up federal enforcement, inhibiting immigration, incorporation into communities, legal threats and hostile reception by government underground, rocking with anxiety and the risk of arbitration, develop strategies of avoidance of pitting into mitigate the discovery of the unauthorized status immigrants who are afraid to leave their houses, foster less vibrant, specifically unengaged neighborhoods, affect documented and undocumented, view that for friends and loved ones could be deported when in contact with officials, allowing action up to 100 miles in the country, enables agents to conduct routine searches for unauthorized migrants without probable cause or warrants, complicate everyday lives, and ag labor shortage now, immigrants are key. Garcia 19. Abandoned cost because couldn't find enough workers, runs down the stream of field hands, Mexican immigrants has dried up in California. 7% of California farmers reported that they've struggled to find workers in 2018 compared with 23% in 2014. Fresh market can't be easily created with machines. California grows more than a third of the country's vegetables, but 2/3 of the country's food is not through accident. That field hand disappearance coincides with the rise of the build of all anti-immigrant rhetoric and mainstream politics, sharp political climate of rapid anxiety around immigrants. California lost 750,000 undocumented immigrants when the government announces that only raids in a certain place. People won't go to work because of fear they will be taken effect on agriculture. A lot of attitudes towards undocumented immigration. Farmers scramble to hire more field hands. A2A program increases labor costs, increases the obstacles that farmers face in order to hire and maintain employees. A very expensive, confusing, problematic system. Mechanization can't replace humans for many crops as production crops costs creep up. Some farmers will rip up crops they've tended for decades. Gridlock in Washington has left them with little hope for improvement, and local decline collapses food security. During 13, yes, I'm sure there's less demand for services to create jobs on rural crops. Reducing costs with the struggle finding a way to make rural America enticing. Rural America will manage the nation's well-being in the country where food is abundant, taken for granted. Urban, suburban, facing tight rural America recently averted of crisis. Facing the dairy industry, farmers Islamic case strongly agree with the declining rural America while political power may have eroded. Farmers spend the food they produce as evidence of borders and food conflicts to nuclear FDI 12. Conflicts in next century was likely to be fought over lack of resources, French and Russian Germany, World War II, and fiber food. The future can be safely granted. The safe and unstable hosted by wars alive with the following increasingly credible scenario for World War III. Best reading self-referring chain of resource conflicts, the potential trigger for nuclear war, the US and people defend. US is elected provide a food assistance, the world have political and national assistance, provide farmers technical assistance for farmers, improve production, restore. The second advantage is disease. That's where immigrants stay away from public health care and fear procreationally. Plan eliminates the fear by removing surveillance more intent. If they find out that they need a further follow-up, they won't go through screwed love number of undocumented immigrants who return to health centers instead of relying on illegal network of doctors and traditional faith healers. Undocumented groups are very fearful of seeking that kind of care and fear of being reported to authorities, and lack of healthcare causes uncontrollable disease. Below 13. Inadequate access to healthcare and treatment can lead to spread of disease inside the disease control FFCB rate among foreign purposes. Persons 12.5 times higher. Persons that exclude undocumented immigrants from the U.S. healthcare system. The applications that impact public health care options available to adequately and correctly address the preventable disease and illness rate of risk of exposure to disease when access to healthcare is limited, causing extinction. Part 16. When they introduce long-range transportation, the success of more aggressive changes, they use long-range transportation as get local extinction. Higher aggressive pathogens able to survive and spread that die higher. With population by human civilization may be approaching such a critical threshold. Phase changes into extinction of sudden system that sea tables, communities, couple of big connection, social direction, and sea predators. Events like mass having for much greater risk in Africa prove unstoppable. Skip the next part in the plan. Thus, I from the United States internal domestic predictive immigration policing is unjust. Skip the first part, and yes, they use predictive policing. Case for printing. Actuates are ribbon cutting for the government surveillance data. You have power tools and very good to identify target tracking spy and immigrants without border already in the hands of police officers across the country. As using an act capable of taking a tight scrap of information, turning into an intimate profile and individual, all without a warrant or any user oversight developed by policy that makes predictive policing software a terrifying tool every agency from LAPD to ICE and non-citizens facing deportation, risk being deported back into environments of torture. The only option is protected by the Convention Against Torture, but courts are played by extremely narrow interpretations of that, which prevents it from solving chart 13. A non-citizen who fear being tortured if deported has only one option: convention of protection. Vigilant had a psychotic condition without medication, even suffer mental breakdown, which would offer his jailer justification to torture, and then the BIA's narrow view of torture. Vigilant cannot prove his likely torturous facility intended to torture, and situations such as that suggest the need to address the inconsistency of the interpretation of the convention to under. One entries dropped the debate of the one too short topic maybe have a shot at substance, no negative RL, that was committed to an hour. Collapse the short shell and get away with an infinite one to see of these video. Sheer root times on theory skip the 3.4, value after elliptically part of the negative things, believe the window shell and be back the ash shell and the long to an hour. Or it's impossible for me to be back there shell and my shell in the shorter two-way and fair fairness is voted since any activities based on wins and losses. Skip the RBI stuff and simple discussions about immigration that don't abandon hypothetical change, breed complacency, our model of decision making courage is real accessible deliberation living 18. Rocco conducted a study of the sessions of high school. The results are generally disappointing. Few students change their minds regarding immigration. Instead, students mostly voice their already held beliefs about immigration. Deliberation means communicating to make a collective decision before you as a group. Decision making aimed at reaching a decision on an action plan. A realistic simulation of high stakes process encourages students to act like decision makers. Students should represent themselves in making real decisions that yield fictional outcomes. Learn to deliberate by making actual decisions as well. Small scale actual deliberation, the deliberative democracy discussion of current national issues without deliberation unless it involves actual decision making. Deliberation about immigration policy by adolescents, the key to expanding horizons of controversial issues and acting skills critical in the public. Queer Crocker 18. Deliberation aimed at action plan think with one another about the power they exercise. Deliberation vigor by greater exchange engagement of youth and civic life components will learn from each other and expand each other's horizons. Partners can arrive at acceptable solutions via dialogue. Deliberation of public policy issues provides an opportunity for adolescents to be person and act skills critical to deliberation of the public. Data analysis provided drawn from the deliberation on immigration. Discussions of immigration may stimulate greater attention to the pedagogical affordances and hurdles and all of the public policy issues. Skip the next round. Af gets RBI's A skew. There's no 2AC. The whole parted offense of the one area to overcover since the 6-minute turnover is devastating, which encourages them to underdevelop in the 1C and overdevelop in the NRs.
Can you send a marked doc?
I'll just say it.
Yeah. Oh, never mind. I need that. Nah, I just deleted the value.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, it'll auto mark the doc if you hit Alt F4.
Yeah, yeah. If you wanna like clear up some space, delete system 32. It'll make email chains way faster.
Or you know what? Send that whole back file actually to golden
All the way over there. Oh.
No.
I can watch this.
Just hit eject heck out of it.
Send to the pool.docs. So, no one knows the password to that email.
Where's like a hat? No, is that it? I won't. I'm not turning it upside down.
Alright, do you want to cross this later?
Yep. Oh, when I command F predictive policing in the app, it shows up only in the tags of the cards housed the app topical.
What do you mean?
When I command F predictive policing in the doc, it only shows up in the.
Under the plan, it talks about how ICE is using predictive policing to find like high
Can you
risk areas.
show me like?
Case or 20.
Yeah. So the case of 20 evidence, it just mentions a company that made a
No,
predictive
and it
policing
says that ICE
software.
currently
It doesn't
uses
say. I've read the evidence.
It says that they use AI-powered tools
It
that allow them
says
to identify
no.
target
No,
immigrants
that's not
based
what
on
it
like high
said. It
risk
says ICE uses an app capable of taking a step. Alright, whatever, we'll go on. The Sharp 13 evidence, can you explain it to me?
Where is that?
Underneath.
Oh, it just says that if citizens are deported, they face like going back to environments of torture.
Alright, why does after come before the no theory?
You can win your shell in the 2NR and beat my shell in the 2NR, where it's impossible for me to win my shell and beat your shell in the shorter 2AR.
Alright, cool. The Levine 18 evidence, you talk about how discussions about immigration are like good for deliberation. How does the app do that?
Discussions aren't good. It's decision making and discussions about hypothetical change are good.
Can
It's
you
just
explain
like
it
talking about
again?
immigration isn't good, but flash about it is good.
Can you explain it?
Oh, the Levine 18. So it's a study from like Crocco that used a study of discussions in high school, and the results were disappointing because like no students actually changed their mind. But if the discussions were focused on deliberation, which is distinct from discussions because
What's deliberation?
it's talking about like imagining hypothetical change. Like it says if the students should represent themselves in making real decisions that yield fictional outcomes beyond, obviously that type of debate is way better for immigration policy.
Alright, let's get to the first advantage. Can you explain the link chain?
The immigrants are afraid to work in ag fields because of like predictive policing technology, ICE and all, that causes ag labor shortages, causes decline of rural areas which make most food, causes food conflicts.
This graph, what does it represent? It just seems to talk about residents, not like agricultural labor shortage.
What do you mean? The
The graph underneath Garcia 19.
Oh, it's not important. I just kept it in there. I mean,
Alright, why is local decline key to food security?
like most rural areas produce food. There's no like food production in urban areas.
Can you draw a line from this evidence that says that?
It says that rural America still matters to the nation's well-being, where food is abundant. Urban and suburban fates are tied to rural America because they produce most of it.
Why does that mean collapsing of food security? It just seems to
Collapse
say
of-
like it's
Like if they're not able to produce crops because there's no one that would work on the farms, the U.S. would not be able to sell food. Like the Miller 10 says that the U.S. is the largest provider of food in the world, half of the total international, which is why the U.S. is key.
Alright, how do diseases cause extinction?
They spread to everyone.
Alright, it's too often the case.
And the correct question is why is there no error bars on these graphs?
My question is, what's an email chain?
You made the two
Big
glasses.
fish theory.
We don't have those where I'm from. We do real debate where I'm from. We talk about values.
Jesse's around.
This is really where I'm from, and we-
Hey. Is there a particular spot on the is there a particular spot on the case debate we're starting?
Yeah, we're starting on the underview.
You said two off?
Yeah.
Great. Give me one second.
Got it.
My computer's scanning for viruses from my dog. It's called the Strake Jesuit.
Oh god, Strake's about to steal all my back files.
What back files?
Alright, I'm good.
Dude. But I said it louder so I get the credit. It's a win.
Alright.
Alright, is
Hold
anyone
on.
not ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, wait. Okay, I'm ready.
Interpretation of affirmative data must define all instances of predictive policing as unjust violation. You specify programs are in predictive policing in contexts undocumented and immigrants, and predictive policing is defined as major 19. The collection and analysis of data about previous crimes for identification and prediction of individuals or geospatial areas with an increased probability of criminal activity. And the standards are one limiting ground. There's an endlessly and growing list of crimes that can be used for predictive policing. 4. Where once a criminal law may have stood as well understood, now there is only ability to competitive looks of crimes are incontrovertible, involving murder, rape, robbery, arson, and the like. Beyond those crimes is a seemingly endless list of behaviors that do not seem well suited for penal code. And this means that they can expect infinite combinations of crime and law. Any permutation of them is supposed to be and actually against thousands of individuals. Massively excusing given as you have infinite preference for only one ask. Whereas I won't be prepared for you to keep your because it ensures equitable preference and TVS. All you get rid of your plan is an event under a horror's advocate. You drop the bidder. The beast is already current in my time kitchen. I should to cross up the fairness of the voter out from the underview. These competing interests of each other race it's tough to figure out the best possible and no justified. And the voice and intervention says that a clear bright line. No RBI is able to debating. You'll just stay there and prepare to justify infinite abuse. The results in shelling fact people into the logic you don't where the form meeting the bidding being fair. Logic always because it definitionally determines what arguments are valid or not. And the second is the K is not a floating peg. The land we stand on today once belonged to the Apache and the Mansis tribe who were born, flourished, and buried here in El Paso. Eventually, settlers arrived from the 13 colonies and from Spanish Mexico and hoped to establish new homesteads. The tribes fought back alongside other tribes but were defeated by disease and warfare. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and in 1963, the Chamizal Treaty forced the tribes to move and establish El Paso as a settled homestead. Settled colonialism is the permanent structure of the nation-state which requires the elimination and the disciple land via the occupation and settlers appropriation of land towards native and ghosts and shuttle slaves into excess slavery tucking until settled colonial state require motive settled appropriation and the disciple land settlers insist on sovereignty over all things in their new domain. Settlers make land their new homes and capital the disruption and the disciple represents epistemic, ontological, cosmological violence not to really contained in the arrival of the settler but is reasserted each day. Settlers are diverse. Decolonization must involve the repatriation of land, simultaneous recognition of how land and relations have been differently understood and enacted in progress and reform within the United States and inevitably fails but entails the settled colonial violence notions of futurism and inextricably tied to native erasure tucking in 12. Safety of settlers is only guaranteed by the annihilation of Indians by the destroyer or assembly both aimed at making advantage from the landscape. Everything when the settled colonial society disappeared them from the land. This is how society can have this conflicting messages about indigenous or dead and the conservation and indigenous are less than priorities, desire to erase and inevitable to resolve destruction of inhabitants, desire to reconcile, do not have to deal with Indian problem anymore, and prioritizing consequentialism in the settled government that elevates settled futurity above violence against indigenous people, their family or cause on elimination and natives or secure their own survival. Calderon 14. Settled governments maintain an origin story of the United States that pursued settled futurity. American colonists simultaneously built the Indian while becoming the Indian, relying on the ideologies of the Indian and to free themselves from the European settled nativism as well. Emerging an Indian past and the settled future. The stories in foreign settled nationalism that relies on indigenous absence, settled nationalism enforced legal as well as symbolic parameters and citizenship and a settled state enabling members of the national community to define citizenship. They structure being belonging to racial hierarchies and promote European settlers become the law. Stop planning indigenous law settled governments reject non-whites, those who are inassimilable and undesirable, and their invocation of survival is just justification for the plan makes all atrocities possible and removes the value of survival itself in an attempt to save our world. They have destroyed it. Calhoun 73. In the name of survival, evils have been committed against individuals, including right to life, upheld by the Supreme Court. A threat to security can justify acts that otherwise blatantly unjustifiable. Survival of the Aryan race was Nazism. Survival of South Africa imposed apartheid. Survival requires that we overthrow religious, ethical, and political systems. No imaginable evil, which we some groups is not willing to inflict on another for the sake of survival. The dictators never talk about aggression is only a need to defend the fatherland, to save them from discretion and destruction of enemies. And the alternative is one of decolonization. Settlers need to enact an ethical and incommensurable include consider futurity tugging and toe. And ethical and incommensurability stands in contract to reconciliation. What will happen after these questions need not be answered for decolonization to exist. Decolonization is not incompatible with settled futurity. Native peace once the settler is gone are unrestricted possibilities. And the role of the embrace settled disorientation. This is the striation of smooth spaces inside of it that normalizes settled subject and a recognition that this land is not ours. Henderson 15. The conscience constantly reveals the failure of internalization and expresses irrational anxiety whenever settlers is confronted with the facts regarding their colonizing status and restoring of settled colonial structure. Decentralized settler methodologies resistance occurs in a disruptive speech act of repetitive practice of everyday life or like give settled spaces their meaning and radically the otherwise new spaces of settled colonialism disrupts production of the settled subject by forcing encounters of people they were imagined to be gone. And on the case versus the plan for the internal domestic predicted the immigration policing is not a thing. The app doesn't do anything since it eliminates something that does not exist, but negative on presumption statements are more often false than true because any part being false if you negate if there's no often because the resolution is probably false. Now go to the underview. There's a few problems. There's a few problems with the underview. Start on one air theory. No, you don't get one air theory because one of times you get 7 minutes on theory and I only get 6 minutes and 1 minute is detrimental because theories of blip debate and 1 minute is a lot in terms of theory. Now you say no to an hour theory, but look, it allows for severance percent. I can't check back again, so it means I have to get 2 an hour theory to check back against infinite abuse. You say theory always negative theory, but no, you have 2 speeches on theory and no more time on it, which means that you'll always win on theory. 1 minute difference is drastic considering the theories of blip again. You say the Libyan evidence, no reason why the app is key for the second. The app doesn't do anything for deliberation considering it does nothing because domestic immigration and predictive policing is not a thing. Now go to the advantage. One is starting on the first advantage. One is the biggest thing is you should hurt heavily negative in this debate from a question of evidence. The word predictive policing is said only once and it's in the plan text. Oh, I forgot to go to the framing. You say extinction always, but no. First it relies on the advantages being true. But we're going to prove them false. Second, all the link chains are really small. Second, third is the extinction. Third is the extinction is an excuse for settlers. Is an excuse for settlers to push out the natives because they are trying to save them. But that's just the settled logic. Now go on the Garcia case 12 evidence. So your evidence indicates a multitude of anti-immigrant laws cause immigrants to stay away from the USA, which proves all causes. Second is I still have the bias and ability to raid houses whenever they want because they don't need probable cause, which proves itself. Now the Garcia 19 evidence. One is agricultural labor shortage. Now means that uniqueness overwhelms the link that should have happened already or never happened at all. Second is aquaponics. South Day or rural American food key arguments. Aquaponics no D. Aquaponics is a sustainable method of raising fish and vegetables with the type of indoor farming you grow substantially more food with less water, land, and labor than traditional or agricultural aquaponics is the form of agriculture that combines raising fish and takes secretly agriculture with solar plant culture, hydroponics, and cut the card there. On the second advantage versus your evidence is horrible. It elicits federal privacy laws. Stop immigration officers from accessing and health workers with undocumented people still stays away. And nothing about the applying text tells us. Second is the migrants don't actually spread the disease. Smith 18. Immigrants make up a significant part of the significant portion of the healthcare force in their new homelands. There is no evidence to show that migrants are spreading disease. That is false argument that you should keep migrants out. And fourth, the third is no extinction from disease burnout variation check. York 14. Diseases don't drive species extinct. The most dangerous spread from one individual to another. If disease is highly lethal, the high population drops and becomes less likely individuals to contact each other. That's another mark, Doc.
Okay. You good for cross?
Yeah.
So decolonization, what does that look like?
Get off the land.
So we send back the immigrants to countries where they face torture.
What?
The
It's
sharp.
like it's not a question of like. me
So they
feeling
get off the land, they go
it's
back
like
to
an
countries where they face
orientation
torture.
it's an
So they-
orientation.
So
to
we
what-
have an orientation where we just send all of the immigrants back to countries
Yeah, they
where
don't
face
belong
torture.
here. It's
So
the
they
indigenous
should just
land.
be tortured in like their home countries.
No, I
where
think
they
that's a
face
problem with
genocides.
the country, not a problem with the
But
alternative.
the alternative forces them to go to those countries. So we just
No,
let
it
them just
doesn't. We
get
don't
tortured.
feel the alternative.
Yeah, but your alternative is an orientation where they should not belong in the U.S. Wouldn't that justify them being tortured in their home countries?
No, because that's a problem with the country. We don't say that. The alternative specifically does not say we should torture every single immigrant that.
But it
doesn't
says that
belong.
they don't belong in the U.S. It seems the same as like
It's
racist
also
logic.
it's also not fiated, because it's an orientation towards the basics. We should get off the land because it's a good thing. It's not our land. We should get off of it.
Okay, how can aquaponics produce large-scale agriculture? It says they're like in fish tanks.
Yeah, fish poop a lot, so we can use that.
Yeah, but how does that solve like there's no one to like work the tanks? There's no labor shortages.
There are things called irrigation systems and what are those called?
Yeah, but who's gonna
Machines.
harvest the crops?
It's not like every single laborer in the agricultural system will just leave.
Okay. The diseases won't cause extinction. So, what was the warrant in the card?
It says that the most dangerous diseases only spread from one to another, and at worst, the population drops.
Okay. Migrants don't spread diseases. Like, where's the evidence in this card?
What?
Where's like the evidence that says that they don't have diseases?
It's not that they
It seems
don't.
like it's just a
It's
claim.
not that they don't have diseases. It's that they don't spread diseases. They have like.
How would they like not spread diseases? Are they like, are we immune to diseases now?
No, that's not what it says. It's not a question that they don't have diseases anymore. The argument says that there isn't, they haven't historically spread diseases. Your evidence is just a ploy to keep immigrants out.
Okay.
Alright, I'm about to send the markup.
Yeah. The critique, do you think settler colonialism is ontological?
Yeah.
Okay. Progress and reform causes settler colonialist violence. How does our reform specifically cause settler colonialist violence?
Because it's inextricably tied to futurism, and we say futurism is bad when you're on a land that's not
Alright,
yours.
everyone leaves the land, no one produces food. Wouldn't that still cause nuclear war?
That assumes that indigenous people can't farm themselves. I would say that's probably
But
bad.
how would they be able to run like mass production facilities?
You realize that there isn't like 3 billion, like there isn't as many Americans as there are indigenous people. We don't need mass agriculture farm to feed them.
Okay, have you sent it yet?
Yeah, I sent that.
Let me download it first.
Hi.
Bye, friends.
I love this thing.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Such a great group chat.
Okay, 160. It'll be P case then the K.
Zircon.
Yeah. Sure. T case K. Anyone not ready?
Hold on.
I'm still opening it.
Okay. Alright.
I'm good.
It's fine. I'll get it after. Just
Just checking in, anyone not ready? Counter-interpretation app intensified type of predictability seen that about this class playing for physics data education, so we learn about specific issues and topic and satisfies the value described by the argument. Since we are more specific, say some difference and told us to and facilitate the set time key education, we incentivize the best arguments and thought reasonability on key with the value of that having a solvency advocate and cards of the literature, use the link in a background grab, and should direct when you engage with hold argument of the intervention, use reasonability on T. It leads to better education, so we focus on the topic competing interference is based at the bottom because there was something I could have done this more for, which incentivizes things like choose theory, which is always lose the limits that for the one turn they get infinite picture that way since every 6 months when you see often causing a winner restart, they take that the TFA 2 no infinite cases may be an ideal world, but research time in 2 months could rate as B functional load check. There may be infinite alpha there and infinite alpha advantage with large enough impact to solve advocates. Speaking on the P5 with the staff as a separate advantage, you still would never respond. Also, affirming charter because of the separate persecuting down to mean negative B sideways after B under their interview only have one out, so they could create the perfect one and see and always win. Every single round the case we stop extinction from food wars by getting rid of predictive policing, which provides eyes from rating immigrant locations. They just said their only answer is aquaponics, but they conceded that one, there's no one to run the aquaponics if we ran out of immigration labor, which means it does not solve the food war. Cause extinction is guaranteed. Now the on favorite first case back to there. On plan car first, it will get the plan car is fixed by passive going through things like the House and Congress. They'll fix any changes. Second, yes, it is. RF just says internal and domestic. They mean the same thing, which would obviously be fixed. But the House also presumption affirms if I said my name's to read. You presume it's true. Now the case. Framing control is balanced to evaluate the material consequences of the policy competitive directly. The anything else mid 6 minutes of Falcon sequence which use that strategy into logic or epistemology inherently type the consequences of the plans. It makes no sense to separate them. Overview on the case. Framing issue vote app on the risk of offense. If they're right about ontology, then there's no dissent to at least trying the app. But if we're right on ontology being false, it causes massive balance against native populations. Their second analysis argues that to expose the balance contingent nature. Contradiction of the liberal economy means it's valuable justified. This one was subject able to act otherwise. Subject was strictly biological massive program influence is mediated by inconsistent weapon representations, but by natural but of autonomy contradictions from the conflicts internal liberal economy. Our places where freedom has a chance to exist in our response to settled colonialism because of future orientation that adversely pockets of resistance and contingent action for 19. Certainly decolonizes bound up with negating the very process of contracting alternative knowledge that can support and sustain a decolonized future. Settled colonialism is not a meta-structure composed of a series of structures and processes both generative and generated by intersecting interactive forces of power, opens up the space of resistance and change, creating alliance and collective action and confront multiple dimensions of the matrix and specifically targeted demands against institutions have empirically been successful. Successfully advisor Trump they must find ways to materially disrupt colonialism. The Wisconsin 16. These same committees result on justice systems of force in the regime since the 1970s. Indigenous people in the U.S. have compelled states to federal policies like removal of indigenous children, abusive residential system, relocation of indigenous workers, coercive policies have been replaced with policies that recognize indigenous rights to land. Jurisdiction and sovereignty gains are limited, but they are still gains. Indigenous plans that prevented corporations from exploiting natural resources. The Trump turns the day power in the U.S. is clear that the state is entering a new age to prevail. Indigenous people in the left must understand the prevail, the way the emerging system will depossess indigenous communities and framing settled colonialism through internalizing land space, indigenous liberation impossible. Bus 18. Circle perspective closed down possibilities of imagining a type of social and political transformation. The notion of decolonization, the only solution to settled colonialism renders largely unachievable if not impossible, and seeking to elucidate the knowledge of elimination that's the overarching historical force. There's an operational weakness in the theory of practical ontological inherently desires elimination of the AG, the categorical distinction of check necessary political strategy to guard against the absorption of pessimism, fatalism, and nonetheless fatalism, reified settler colonialism, codified settled colonialism, the link lay. First overview, all of their links require ontology, and they have to win ontology because it's all future isn't bad. If we win any risk that we're a good method, you should first. First they say progress and reform is bad, but they have no specific link on how our specific progress causes more settler colonialism violence. They say consequentialism bad, but alternative frameworks should definitely work. Even if consequentialism is bad, it's not as bad as other. If we didn't use consequentialism, we would ignore material violence in native space. They say that the survival is bad, but obviously the infinite future generations of culture native loss would outweigh some white person's pleasure from it. The alternative debate. First on the alternative permutation do both we can embrace decolonization while also stopping predictive policing. They're not mutually exclusive. Second, the alternative is terrible. One, they conceded that deportation and just getting out of natives would lead them to go to countries where they'd be psychologically tortured and cause massive mental health problems. It would kill millions of immigrants because they would be forced to go back to their homes. Second, it still causes nuclear war. If we leave all the land, food wars still happen because no one will be able to fill us, which destroys all native land because of nuclear war. And second, nuclear reactors would also be ditched, which would blow up and kill all natives and destroy all native land if we just leave the U.S. all of a sudden.
Is it time to ask questions? Was there an RV on T?
No, they're not.
Can someone close that door? You didn't read an extract, right?
Huh?
You didn't read an extract, right?
Oh, the 4-point limits?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Orders overview. Overview. Overview T, and then case if I have time.
Should I flow it on T? Like the overview?
The overview is just like kicking flows.
So I will flow it on the T flow.
Yeah. Alright, is anyone not ready? You didn't ask for the status of the alternative conduct. We're gonna hit you. The permutations are just competition, tested competition, which means that's not offense for you. Go to the default. The overview is that you shouldn't vote for Turin because he has red. Vote for me because I'm going to win the T debate. First is don't allow any two-year agree because I don't have agree enough to respond to everything they say. So everything they say is uncontested, which makes it impossible for me to win T. Now, T outweighs 2 because A is my strategies, and 4, but the absence of 1 is completely reactionary, which means that absence of unfair attitude, unfair strategies in order to respond on a reciprocal basis and be able to have some substantial edge. Also, I answered your picks argument because what people read when they don't have substantial answers, they don't pick out the things like an agent, which means it's net worth. People, there is a premium ratio burden should be topical, whereas there's no burden for the net to be fair. Every app is expected to be topical, which means that if I win T, you preclude and outweighs all your arguments. Now extend the interpretation and violation. The app must depend on instance and predictive policing as just you have considered the violation. There is no contestation. Now go to the paradigm issues. You extend fairness of the voter. Extend fairness of the voter from the interview. Now contested fairness of the voter because the debate is a given that requires objective evaluation. We're going to put that T as a voting issue. Extend the debate into feature of reasons. I could not for debate. Now go to the competing interests versus reasonability debate. You consider that reasonability is arbitrary, has no considered right, and invites judge intervention. Now that outweighs because judge intervention has the strongest internal link to fairness because it takes the debate out of the debater's hand, which means that always all your reasonability standards. Either way, we're gonna line by line them. You consider that it's arbitrary, so you'll just change your bright line every single round. You say Lincoln impact turning ground, but no, I couldn't read any ground because you stole all of it. This is there is literally no literature about immigration, domestic immigration predictive policing, as proven by the screenshot on Plan Flood that showed that there is literally zero lit about this, which proves that this is a super unfair app, and I can't read any dissets or counterpoints as proven by why I read K and T. I didn't read anything topical, which proves the abuse. Now you say Bradland of solvency again and card in the literature, but the problem here is that the solvency app is sort of predictive policing once in the whole app. It says it only in the taglines and once in that one part, which proves the abuse. Also, you can just find solvency advocates on the 100 page of Google Warriors ICANN, which proves that solvency advocates don't solve. Now you'll just change your brand line every round. Now you say your reasonability leads to better education, but one is that you didn't read education as a voter. It's not in the round. You can check the T-show. There's no justification. Either way, it's not a voter because A points we can get it from other places like school. We can get it from other places like school. Not a debate is not intrinsically an educational space. And this you say competing interests leads to a ratio at the bottom, i.e. shoes theory. But no, but there's a difference between plains bad and shoes theory. The show is not frivolous. You kind of on your competing interests leads to a ratio at the top because we try and find the best norms. In this specific instance, it would be a different situation if I read things like shoes theory or anything else like that. Now go to the standards. Actually, the TVA first. You can cite your ballot here. The concession of the TVA is a game over issue. You could read your app as an abandoned underhold rest. The TVA non-unique all your options to prove that there is only a small risk of a disattach T, which means that you would vote negative on the competing interests. It also means that you vote negative on a risk of offense to T, since there's no offense for them. There's no offense for them, but only a risk of a disattach T, a risk of a disattach T. So that means you would err negatively high. Now highly. Now go to the standard. We're not gonna go for limits, which means that your B point doesn't apply. We're gonna go for the ground evidence. Extend the Luna 04 evidence. Says that there is an endless and growing list of crimes that can be used for predictive policing, i.e. murder, rape, or arson, etc., and robbery, etc., which proves that the list of crimes is way too long. I mean, you can expect any one of those crimes and a permutation of them, and that would still all on my ground, i.e. in this round when you expect undocumented immigrants. There is literally no literature. Look at the screenshot. There isn't any literature, which proves that the abuse for the ground. The ground outweighs all your counterinterpretation because it controls the internal to in-round argumentation. Without ground, I don't have any basis to make arguments in the round, which outweighs on irreversibility and magnitude. The crimes expecting crimes dealing from picks like human trafficking or like child porn dissents, which proves that I couldn't read anything topical on this. Now you say clash on the competing interests, but no, A point is it's false. You people write about the idea of predictive policing being bad all the time. Literally every whole rest app proves that, and also you could just read a framework that solves all of the clash. B point is turn you not exclude my ground, but second allows me to use my higher quality prep and allows better clash. C point is that we can learn more about the topic as a whole. Uniquely outweighs because we only have one term on this topic, which is why you should prefer this. Now that's the only standard for competing interests. You're not going to win that. Now go to the response to the standards. You say picks, but no one is that you get 1 of your 3 to check back, make arguments why picks are bad. That disincentivizes people from reading them. And you can just win on that as well, or read it in the 1AC underview, which solves for the reject 1 of your 3 arguments. B point is a severance for insult. You just become the counterpoint. C point is you can read context and methods stuff where picks don't negate. I.e. on this topic, generics proves that picks don't negate. the what is inherent, there's more incentive to read pics of plain assets. So you'll just read, I'll just read after counterplans or other pics into, since I have no prep negative infinite caseless argument, this only applies for limits, which it doesn't apply for ground either way. In the third argument, you say non-unique, you'll just read indifferent advantages on the whole rest of it. So we don't have to prep about this every single advantage. We can just read this as aren't specific but still linked. Because you defend whole rest. That's the whole point of the abuse, because we can still read this sets that apply to the app. And the B point is that this is just a reason actually why the TBA would solve means that my interp outweighs you say affirming is harder, but no, you have first and last speech, which creates judgments because the last speech is the one you're most prone to. You also consider that on theory debate you have 7 minutes, whereas I have 6 minutes, which means that you will always be ahead on the theory debate. B point is that you have an infinite prep time for following every single argument. C point is this is arbitrary. There's no warrant actually why this means you get to be unfair. This incentivizes infinitely bad practices, so you should reject this argument now. We've won the T flow. There's no RBIs. We've won competing interps. We've won draft debater. We've won the B story. Vote negative on T. Goes to the case. You conceded the multiple indexes that advantage versus that you should are heavily negative in this debate from a question of evidence that words predictive policing is said only once and it's in the plan text. You also conceded that I still has bias and ability to rate houses whenever they want because they don't need probable cause, which still deters immigrants from agricultural farms. You don't solve.
Oh, yeah. Case then T.
One sec.
Okay. Anyone not really? Great. Case the only put defense any risk to tapestry means you affirm the second they already conceded presumption affirms, which is the answer to plan so even if they went defense, you still affirm second. They conceded the answer to this because ICE can't properly rate houses because they don't have the algorithms to target which communities have high risk of immigration, which means it drains their resources, which prevents a lot of deportations. That's a theory debate. I'm going to concede the competing interps as a question of models debate. Here's what I'm going for. I'm going hard on the pics. If pics lead to infinite abuse, you should determine which interp is worse for debate. It outweighs any tiny ground loss under their interp. Since under my interp, the next still has the ability to negate the resolution since they have generic same can be specific dissets like cartels, for example, against our app. But under their interp, the app would always lose because we always lose to a pick because they moved 6 minutes of AC offense, especially on this topic where there's so many picks it's impossible for us to prep the infinite amount of picks while there's functional limits on the type of ask we can read, which means that there's less abuse under the app world. I'll answer the picks arguments or the defensive picks right now. First, they say we can beat one argument. This is a terrible argument. You can just have a prepped out counter interp. So pick like a really good picks, good counter interp, which means you'll always win on the theory debate because you have 7 minutes to just answer a picks in a bad shell. In the first place, second, they say we can just severance out. The severance is cheating. We would obviously lose the theory under that interp. Second, third, they say we could beat Kant. No, we would always lose to things like epistemic modesty plus a pick. They say picks don't negate. No, picks always negate. It requires truth testing, and people can just answer truth testing. They say we encourage more picks because it leads to agent counter plans. But we can obviously beat back cheaty picks like consult or agents with theory, but topic picks are way harder to beat back, which turns the pick standards, which means we're winning 100% chance of link on picks. The next argument they go for is the TVA is conceded. No, but they've conceded that the TVA doesn't solve the picks advantage because if you defend the whole resolution, you can still pick out of stuff. That was in the 1 AR. I don't know what he's saying about how it's conceded, which means 100% chance of link that picks would lead to infinite abuse since it will always lose under their interp. The last argument they conceded is that we would always lose under their interp because there's only one AF under their interp, which means they could just make a perfect 1 and C and that they will always win every round because they could spend 2 months just creating a perfect 1 and C while the AF has to spread then through research on prepping infinite 1 and C positions, which means we would always lose. Now I just have to win some defense on the ground standard, which means you can easily vote on the pick. I'll answer this like silly screenshot thing about how there was no prep against this app. Obviously internal and domestic mean the same thing, it was just a typo. There's no like offense or impact to this like screenshot in the doc anyway. Now I'll put defense on the ground standard. First, ground is inherently tied to limits. If we win that there are a limited amount of apps, that means you have more ground because you only have to prep a couple apps. They conceded there's no infinite case list because there's only one tournament on this topic and we have constrained research time and only 2 months to prep, or 1 month to prep this entire topic, which prevents us from creating infinite apps. Second, there's conceded function limits with ulcer check because if there's infinite apps, we can't have an infinite app advantages with solvency if it gets large enough impact or ability to win rounds because the apps would just be too small and they would obviously lose to a prep that this or this with large enough scenarios, which means that there is a risk that ground links. So here's the framing issue. There is neg ground. You could beat things like cartels, the elections, things like abolish ICE. At worst, you could just steal stuff from last year's high school policy debate topic. But under their interp, okay, here's how the debate goes down. Under their interp, it's impossible to affirm because we always lose to a pick. While under my interp, they still at least have some ground and ability to negate the resolution while creating equitable date where there's a limited amount of apps and a limited amount of 1 and C positions.